and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Sana Maqbool, with you at PTV WORLD. In today's show, we will be talking about two important topics. The first is with reference to what is going on in the political situation of the country, specifically in the aftermath of comments made by PTI leader Shehbaz Gill in an interview in a television channel where he spoke about controversial statements regarding state institutions and also talked about inciting public against the armed forces, inciting people within the armed ranks as well to revolt against the leadership. And of course, due to these comments, there has been an investigation that has started, and the court has also issued a 2-day physical remand for Shehbaz Gill, and of course investigation is now underway. In its development, we have also seen that there has also been a raid conducted at a house, supposedly at the in-laws house of Shehbaz Gill, where his driver and his wife, one other person, has been arrested. And there's also a lot of discussion surrounding that in terms of what has happened. Is that the way to go about those things? And then of course trying and figuring out what is really happening. This is of course something that the PTI leadership keeps on condemning, talking about how this is not what needs to be done in a democratic country, in a country where there is rule of law, and so they are accusing the government of these actions. But then on the other hand, we see that the PMLN, along with the Interior Minister and the Information Minister, gave a press conference today in which they highlighted various aspects of PTI's leadership and the kind of evidence that is also surfacing in terms of the social media campaigns, as well as the accounts of trolls that have been unearthed in the recent scenario, specifically also regarding the incident of the helicopter crash in which armed personnel lost their lives and got martyred, which also unfortunately faced a lot of controversial and insulting remarks on Twitter. So of course all of these campaigns, and then of course the PTI's leadership's adamant stance regarding the state institutions, and then of course this entire talk of a conspiracy being done against their leadership is something that was mentioned in today's press conference by the PMLN, and highlighted that how this is just an attempt of the PTI to divert the attention from its prohibited funding case. So we're going to be talking a lot about this particular development, what it means for the future of the political scenario of the country, and how moving forward we're going to be able to see any consequence of this, how the PTI's stance is going to now shift or not, considering Shehbaz Gill's comments, and what is the future of not just Shehbaz Gill but other political parties, including the PTI as well. So that's our first segment today. In our next segment, we're going to be talking about the National Day on Minorities that is being observed today, and of course in a couple of days we will also be celebrating 14th of August, and it's going to be the Diamond Jubilee of Pakistan's independence. And in line with that, of course, we're also very, very happy to observe and celebrate the National Day of Minorities as well, which was earlier declared by the government of Pakistan back in 2009. And of course, this day honors the tributes and the sacrifices and the efforts of the minorities of Pakistan in its creation as well, and then post that in nation building as well, and something that we continue to cherish and of course continue to provide our minorities with their rights and this kind of safety and security that all citizens have been guaranteed by our earlier leaders as well. What really needs to be done even more so in terms of securing the rights of the people and the minorities within Pakistan? How can there be even more further protected, especially regarding the increasing intolerance across the globe? That is going to be under discussion in our second segment of the show today. So that's going to be what we're going to be talking about. And for that, I have been joined in the studios, of course, as always, by Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal. And for our first segment, I've been joined online by Rana Ihsan Afzal Khan, leader PMLN, and Dr. Niaz Murtaza, who's a political analyst. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of the show today. Let me start with you, Rana Saab. When we look at what has been going on, of course, in the country in the recent days, there is, of course, very serious condemnation coming in from almost all sides regarding the statements that have been made by the PTI leader Shehbaz Gill as well, and the kind of negative and dire consequences it has for the future and security of Pakistan as well, and how nobody should be able to cross that red line. Of course, these statements have been reiterated in today's press conference as well by PMLN leaders, but I want to understand the future strategy and the different ways in which this particular case is going to be proceeded by the PMLN as well. Of course, we know that there is inquiry underway. There has been an FIR lodged as well. There has been raids in terms of collection of evidence regarding Shehbaz Gill driver and his family as well. But what sort of investigation or consequence are is the PMLN or the government really looking for, and how are they going to be pursuing this in the future?
Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Well, you see, the government has, in a way, the FIR has been launched, and the law enforcement agencies, which are supposed to make investigations, are making the investigations. And what we saw today was that it was revealed that the telephone of Shabazz Gill was missing, and it was seen that the telephone was with the driver. So the police went to retrieve that telephone, and there was resistance and some chaos over there, and I guess hence the police reacted. So I think it is the courts have to decide the case. The evidence has to be presented in front of the courts, and this legal procedure will take the course of the law. Apart from that, I don't think the government itself is involved in you know. Too much into it. It is this case is not going to be a case of political victimization. It should not be, and it is not going to be. So I think the law enforcement agencies, the investigative agencies, and the courts and the prosecution will handle what they're supposed to do, and they will take it
Right. So, Rana Sahab, you
forward.
think that this is having no real or negative impact on the government or the PMLN or the PDM as well, considering the way in which certain actions are being carried out? Because of course, there's a lot of fire that is being shot from PTI's side regarding how the
Yes.
government is acting in a certain way. Are you not taking any hit?
And by the way,
No,
since we are talking, sorry, Rana sir, just to actually interject here, I wanted to understand because there has been precedent in the past as well where you have taken action when you were on the moral high ground, but still you actually got carried away and it ended up in actually framing the narrative against the government. This time also, one can understand Shahbaz Gill, one can even understand his driver, but his wife and infant child, that becomes a step too far, doesn't it? Is it not
Well,
in terms of
Pitafi Saab,
optics, it is going to damage you or not?
Pitafi Saab, we are not in control of what the police on ground does, but we
You are
take
not
our
in
police
control.
very
Hang on, hang
lightly.
on. Hang on,
Let
hang
me
on.
let me
You are
answer your
not
question.
in
I have
control of
let,
your own
let me answer.
police?
No, no, no. What I'm saying is we are not in control of the police, how they manage a certain case. And we take police very lightly. Have you ever seen a video of US police officers if someone tries to resist arrest? So you cannot resist arrest. You cannot make hurdles in the police procedure. So if that is done, the police reacts in a certain way all across the world, and they have a
But
right to. The
Rana Sahab,
fact is
can you
that
still completely divorce yourself from this situation and the police behavior, since of course they're also bound to act in a certain way?
no, no, no.
There
Let,
can't be
let
any
me explain.
extrajudicial or extra
And
constitutional steps.
I'd like to
And
explain this, please.
just to clarify,
Let me explain.
to seek further clarification, Rana Sahab, that infant child, did that infant child also take some kind of action?
No, not at all. Let me explain. The arrest of Shabazz Gill, first of all. When the police tried to arrest him, first of all, there was propaganda that there were people in plain clothes, but the video shows that there was a police car and police officials. And Shabazz Gill had shut his windows. So he was trying to resist arrest. Hence, they broke the windows. When someone comes to arrest me, I have two choices. Either I resist, and then the reaction of the police can be, of an extreme level or whatever. But the other part is that I just give up and give my arrest and take the legal course. So there are two options. Similarly, in this case, I'm not. I don't. Obviously, the infant is innocent. There's no doubt, and the wife, of course, must be innocent as well, related to the case. But if she resisted on ground, if she, made a hurdle in the police investigation, then I suppose they probably took some course of action. And I can't really comment on what happened over there exactly because I'm not aware. But generally speaking, you cannot stop the police action. You cannot be a hurdle in an investigation, you cannot resist arrest.
Very
so
true,
if you
sir.
do that,
Right,
true,
right.
Rana.
It's a difficult spot to be in, but sure. Yes, Faisal.
I'll go towards Dr. Niaz. Dr. Niaz, that was obviously related to whatever is the investigation is being taken by obviously the law enforcing authorities. But coming back to the main, case, is it possible that a prominent figure from a political party, on his own can deliver this kind of statement, and the whole party is denying it, and the whole party is having a different narrative to him? How do you see it as a political party? Where does PTI stand right now?
By the way, is it, just to qualify this point, Dr. Saab, is the action of Chief of Staff of Imran Khan independent of Imran Khan's own counsel?
And also to add, Dr. Niaz, just the earlier discussion with Rana Sahab as well. When we look at this particular situation, do you think that both political parties and both political sides currently stand on a precarious balance, because it could go either way, considering how, depending on how they play it out?
Just to answer each of your points, it's quite likely that what Mr. Shehbaz Gill was doing at the instructions of higher ups within PTI, quite possibly Imran Khan himself. But then still to go to this extent, to start slapping down sedition cases on an off-the-cuff remark on TV, I think it's just going a bit too far. Sedition is an extremely serious matter. I think the laws should be scrapped. They're colonial era acts and laws, and they've been misused throughout the history of Pakistan. Right. And just a few months ago, the PMLN itself was at the receiving end of such charges and similar charges.
I understand that, Dr. Saab, but I just want you to explain what is sedition in your mind, because inciting mutiny within the ranks of armed forces seems to qualify as sedition, does it not?
And if you can and if you can look into the political history of Pakistan, sir, would you have any other examples to give in past? I mean, similar things has happened.
Well, I mean, if you look at certain court judgments, actually, there are similar judgments given by courts that, officers do not have to follow illegal orders, and that's true. And they've given such orders not just for civilians, even for, soldiers. So you can't really say that, it's a very serious thing. If he was going around doing something physical, practical, contacting individual or groups of officers, sending them material, it might be something else. But you know what happens in TV talk shows, people try to show off and, be dramatic. To take something like that,
but Dr. Niaz, can we really sugarcoat it in that way that people just get carried away on television channels? I mean, he's a responsible leader of a major political party in the country. Surely he should think about what words he's using on a television channel.
And by the way, he was reading from a script, and then he was given wide berth by that channel also. There seemed to be some kind of method to this madness.
Yeah, no, I'm not defending the statement itself on political and moral grounds. On political and moral grounds, there is much to condemn such statements and the brand of journalism that channel follows. But what I'm saying is, taking it to the legal end, and that too with such a serious charge as sedition, I think that's going a bit too far. And then what happened to the wife and the poor girl? There are videos of, the poor girl being dragged into courts and, looking scared and traumatized. Sure. This is just stupid. There is no way of defending that.
Valid. But Dr. Niaz, regarding sedition charges, if you think that's not something that should have been done, what should have been done?
Well, I think, there should be moral condemnation, should be political condemnation, and, our agencies are very good at sending messages in discreet manner, telling people to shut up and so on. That is all
but
fine.
What real value does moral condemnation or political condemnation hold in this country?
No, hang on. You are saying that instead of using the legal recourse, our agencies should have sent a message to shut them up?
Yeah, I mean, they have their channels. I mean, they have really raised these people.
Wouldn't it be a very bad precedent, sir?
That's too much. That
wouldn't it be a very bad precedent?
Okay, finish the thought, Dr. Saab.
Dr. Saab.
I think we have lost connection with him, but we'll
Yeah.
come back to that
Rana
and
Saab.
hopefully talk more about this. Yes,
Yeah,
Faisal.
Rana Saab, this episode, from this episode, do you think that the other political parties and individuals at large, they need to learn that in future, that anyone who criticizes in this way or statements of this nature are issued by of any political party, they need to be cautious, and it is a kind of precedent for them?
Well, adding on to Niaz Saab, what he was saying, we need to have a limit of what lines can be crossed and what cannot be crossed, or what is grey and what is black and white. Because if we allow, if we're saying that what Dr. Shahbaz Gill was saying is all right, then there would be a politician who would cross him. And the type of polarization that exists in Pakistan, there's going to be a side which is going to condemn, and then there is a side which is going to appreciate it. So at the end of the day, there has to be a limit to what you can say and what you cannot say. And I suppose when you start telling junior officers to stand up to their senior officers, and if you try to pitch in a way that what we are saying is correct, and they should,
Right.
90% of them are supporting us, then that becomes a different narrative. I think,
Right. In the
we
Rana
have
Saab,
not,
in the war on terror,
just
in the war on terror at the time of national crisis, I totally get what you're saying. But then I don't know whether you have been following what PTI has been saying. They say that your party repeatedly did similar kind of things, and no action was taken against them. But since it is PTI, then action is being taken. What would you say to that?
I think I think that was our MNA from Shekhupura, Mr. Javed, was arrested on sedition, and then he had to face the court, and he got relief from the court. It is political victimization if we do not present him to court. It is political victimization if we lodge a fake case like the heroin case of Rana Sanaullah. It is political victimization if we, if we use NAB and without filing a reference, we put a person in confinement for months and years. That is political victimization. What has happened here is that we have followed the law, an FIR has been registered, and he has been brought to court. So the legal procedure is going to take course, and if the courts find that the line he crossed, which we think that he crossed, he did not cross, he will be free.
Right.
And
Rana
if
Saab,
the other
today in
way,
the press
adding one more
conference.
thing, just one more thing.
Yes,
I did
okay,
not
sure.
see the video of that girl being dragged. If that was the case, I would never defend that. What my point was, it is only that if you stop the police from doing their lawful duty, they can use force, and and that obviously should have a limit, but it should not. But then we need to, as citizens, understand that we cannot resist arrest. We cannot, stop policemen from doing their jobs, and if we do, they can react. So that is all what I was saying. I have not seen the
All right.
videos.
Rana Saab,
There
earlier
was-
today in today's press conference, the information minister quite blatantly spoke about how these instructions or directions were given in from Bani Gala and how they relate back to that, which of course means that you are linking this back to Imran Khan. So when we talk about these sedition charges or whatever action is now being taken against the PTI leadership as Gill, will there be any legal consequence of that taken to Imran Khan as well, or will there be any action from the PMLN or the government to actually make this connection and put it forward legally as well?
Well, Sana, you've called me in your program because I belong to PMLN, and you've introduced me as a leader of PMLN. Shahbaz Gill has been a spokesperson of Punjab government of PTI and the federal government of PTI, and he's the head of staff or security for Imran Khan. So when he is invited on a talk show or to comment on any subject in a TV channel, he's not being called because he's Shahbaz Gill. He's being called because he represents a party. So whatever he has said, it can be debated that he was motivated by the party stance, and that needs to be investigated. And if there is such proof that could link, his statements with some people encouraging him to do that. Obviously, that evidence has to be produced, and all of it will depend on the court proceeding.
Yeah, Dr. Niaz, if we look at the recent past, of course, TLP is one of the parties. The leadership of it issued statements. They were quite similar about the institutions and about the leadership of the institutions, and they were, dealt with iron fist at that time. And it was an example set for the others as well. But still, if the politicians are coming up with such kind of statements, what kind of motive do you see behind it? Are they just trying to shape up their narratives, the political narratives?
Well, TLP went much further than just, verbal, statements on TV. They were out on the streets, they attacked policemen, they attacked, public property, destroyed vehicles. So their case is very, very different. And on these cases, definitely there should be action. And in fact, there hasn't been enough action against the TLP. Most of their, top leaders have been released without any punishment. So I think that kind of a thing is very different. But, verbal statements, they've been from, different parties. People's Party, Mr. Zardari made a very provocative statements about, BRICS and so on. Even, at PMLN Jalsas, people from London made statements, gave names of people and so on. So, this thing has been going on. It should not happen on a political and a moral ground. You can, criticize that. But then I think all parties should make sure that, they don't take it to the next higher level and, start talking about sedition and so on. Now, obviously, PTI has this, long narrative, which I find to be false, of some sort of a US, conspiracy to topple it. And, they are openly asking the army not to be neutral, which is extremely condemnable itself. So, yeah, it is spreading this kind of, a narrative very wrongly. But then, again, I don't think it should be dealt in this manner by, taking it to the level of sedition. I think it has to be dealt with politically, and, the government has to develop its strong narrative,
right,
so that
wisdom should.
Right, Dr. Saab, you just spoke about TLP, right? Let me jog everyone's memory. You're right, at that time, because Asia Bibi was released, at that time there was a lot of violence as well. But these leaders of the party that were booked were basically booked for something else. That was actually exactly the same thing, invoking mutiny or inciting mutiny within army and asking them to actually attack the army chief. That was so. Then they were collected. After that, till the time they did not come on television, apologize and announce their retirement.
True.
Till that time, they were not let go. So there is a precedent. And by the way, while we can say whatever we want to, they are laws. Should they not be followed? And similarly, during the war on terror, when there is no dearth of confusing narratives, is it not important for all the institutions to stay together and to ensure the unity of command?
Well, I think there should have been strong, action, legal action taken against TLP leaders for arson, for destroying public property, for attacking policemen. I think one or two even died in those actions. So there are serious charges that should be brought against them. But, then this is the dual, game that our state often plays. That, very serious charges are ignored, and then, these verbal things are given much more importance. So obviously, there's a lot that needs to be fixed on all sides, but definitely in terms of, narrative and so on, I think there's a lot that one can criticize PTI about, unnecessarily, branding everybody traitor, and, not being willing to sit down with other parties on legislation, on other matters, walking out of parliament, etc. There's a whole litany of complaints that you can have. Right. Definitely, I agree.
Rana Sahab, your party's name just cropped up right now. Dr. Saab was referring to PMLN and their statement from London. Do you want to actually rebut or react to that?
Yeah.
What statement from London? Can you please remind me?
The name of journals were taken, right? And they were
Yes, I
accused of
think.
taking political stances.
Well, I think, even at that, the reason why we called those generals and what our narrative was that the military establishment should stay away from politics. And the reason why those generals were being pinpointed was that, it was felt that there was political interference. Whereas the narrative today of PTI is totally opposite. They're saying, why are you neutral? Even animals are not neutral. They are saying, why are you neutral? The
No, no,
guard
but
should not be
hang on.
neutral.
We are
They
not
should they
talking
should
about.
favor.
So we are not alluding to Imran Khan Saab's language. We are talking about Shehbaz Gill right now. And many will say that since you are still dragging the institutions into these matters, it is a distinction without a difference.
No, no, no. There is a huge difference. Our narrative, even today, is that the establishment should stay away from politics. They do not have any role by the Constitution of Pakistan to be maneuvering political decisions. And the other side has an opposite narrative. So both are different. The other side is saying that you should not be neutral, that you should, pick a side, and we are the naked people, we are the good ones, and they are the bad ones, and you should pick us. So this debate is not allowed in our constitution. This is unconstitutional what he is asking.
Right. Let me go to Dr. Niaz and also talk about when we speak about such comments. Of course, there's a lot of discussion regarding how a certain red line is crossed and how certain things need to be kept in line. But I want to understand because a lot of the PTI followers and perhaps other followers as well claim that there is unnecessary restriction or there is a lot of curtailment on freedom of expression, on what can be said and what can be criticized and what sort of statements can be made. I want to understand, when we talk about red lines, is this really a red line, and what sort of red lines need to be established for everybody to understand that this is not in the benefit of the country? Because in general, when we talk about people support to political parties, they're perhaps viewing this in an entirely different way, not in a particular way that Shehbaz Gill made some comments which crossed the line. They're perhaps viewing it in a way that it is a curtailment of any sort of criticism against a state institution.
Well, I mean, if you look at it legally, obviously, freedom of speech is not limitless. You cannot make speeches inciting violence, hate speech, and so on. That's legally wrong. So that's one red line. But then beyond that, obviously, there is a need for political maturity and, keeping things, not, inciting people based on falsehood. So on that point, I agree with the point that Mr. Faisal made, that what the PMLN was talking about was to keep the establishment out of politics, whereas what PTI is talking about is to become non-neutral and come into politics in its support. And PMLN's narrative about the manipulation in the 2018 elections is also backed by independent neutral observers like the European Union itself, whereas there is no evidence to back what PTI is saying today about the US conspiracy. But again, I think whatever political rhetoric you use, it should be based on truth. It should not be based on lies. It should not raise unnecessary emotions in people. It should not mislead people. I think that should be another political line. Obviously, it's not a legal line, but for any mature national political party, those should be red lines, that they should not peddle lies. They should not unnecessarily incite emotions.
Yeah.
Right.
Dr. Niaz, you are someone who's always advocated democracy. You're someone who's always taught democracy. Political analyst you are. Don't you think that in Pakistan, especially within the political parties of Pakistan, it is becoming a common practice that condemning the institutions and trying to portray that civil supremacy should be endorsed, and the contribution or anything to do with the politics from the institutions should be shunned. It is becoming a common practice by political parties, especially on TV channels, especially on every forum wherever they want to portray as democrat, as civil supremacists. They always use it, and they always use the institutions as a douchebag, or I must say a cushion where you can always punch.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. Whatever a narrative that you build should be based on truth, and the way to figure out the truth is whether neutral observers are saying the same thing or not. So clearly, if I look at evidence before my eyes from good, authentic sources, there are national level observers like PILDAT, the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, then European Union, etc., which do talk about the interference of establishment at certain points in time, in fact throughout the history of Pakistan, and certainly those things should be condemned. But then go to the other side and actually ask institutions to come back into politics when they are showing some inclination towards trying to get out of the mess that they've created for themselves and for the country, then I think it's very objectionable. So I think you can't just say that every criticism of the establishment or of institutions is right if it's is wrong. If it's based on evidence, then there's nothing wrong with
Right,
it.
absolutely. Farrukh, of course, the PTI chief also spoke yesterday and talked about the Shehbaz Gill's remarks and other measures as well. And there wasn't, of course, any outright condemnation of his remarks or in any way that the PTI was completely distancing themselves from these remarks. Instead, we saw a lot of other remarks being made, also referring to how different aspects of the state institutions are perhaps involved in harming the country or have been involved in certain actions which are not entirely in the benefit of Pakistan's interests. So when we look at these statements and the previous context in which PTI has been bringing in these state institutions in the past as well, how is this even benefiting their narrative, and does this not portray Imran Khan as perhaps a dangerous man at the moment?
Right. I don't call anybody dangerous. He received a lot of votes, so I will consider him a leader.
Okay.
But there are things that are dangerous in what he's saying. And I hope I have some time just to qualify these very important nuances that are there. One thing, very quick recap. Actually, when he was talking yesterday, Imran Khan Sahab actually spoke about another conspiracy to turn TTP against his party.
Exactly.
Right? And that was astounding because it was once again another conspiracy. Now let me tell you about a problem that arose from previous conspiracy theories. Remember that in this country, in the war on terror, GHQ, that is General Headquarters, naval installations, Air Force installations, women's colleges, children's schools, everything was attacked, right? And at that time also, there were so many suicide bombings, and yet the country's religious elite could not come together despite the fact that Islam has prohibited categorically any kind of suicide. They could not condemn it because there was so much conspiracy theory in the air. And then all of a sudden, when there is some kind of resurgence of TTP, we once again start hearing about conspiracy theories. That is going to totally divide everything and confuse everybody. And remember, I keep on talking about unity of command. It is very important because you might have thought that you are not fighting the enemy, but the war is not over. At that time, when you have a divided house, it can wreak havoc in the country.
Right.
We shouldn't be doing that, and that is why I'm concerned. Now, let me also very quickly talk about what is behind it all. Imran Khan Sahab, of course, he had his governance model. It had strengths and it had weaknesses. But there is something that nobody wants to talk about because it has become taboo. And that is his wedding and his wife. It is accused that she believes in certain kind of religious aspects, and because of that, Imran Khan Sahab believes, perhaps he's superstitious, he believes in what she says, and that's why, because there was some kind of corruption at that time, and because there was Punjab government which was totally compromised because of that corruption, at that time when he was being removed from power, his wife's actually audio was leaked also to the press, where she is actually telling media trolls of the party to actually build the case of a conspiracy rather than focusing on what is being said about that particular case.
Right.
If that is the situation, and for that our entire society is being divided in the name of a conspiracy, I really shudder to think what will become of this country in coming days. Right? That is the biggest concern. Unfortunately, I did not want to talk about these things, but I have to, because it is out there. And it is really damaging your nation.
Yeah, Rana Saab.
Faisal, we just have to say thank you to both our guests, because our next guest in the next segment is waiting. But thank you very much, Rana Ehsan Saab and Dr. Niaz Mirza, for joining us. We'll, of course, call you back again in the show, and perhaps then Faisal's wish will be granted. We're going to be now moving on to our next segment, which is, of course, the National Minorities Day that is being celebrated in Pakistan. And this day, of course, pays tribute to the sacrifices and the efforts and contributions of minorities in the country. And, of course, the white in our flag that we will also be celebrating in a few days from now regarding the Diamond Jubilee of Pakistan's independence. And so we're going to be talking about how minorities, of course, are not just important in terms of what they've contributed in the creation or in the nation building of the country, but also in terms of Pakistan being able to guarantee its citizens the kind of respect and their rights, the access to religious freedoms, and, of course, security that is indeed important, especially in times today when there is increasing intolerance throughout the world as well. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that and how the world, and particularly Pakistan and its minorities and the people of Pakistan, can still extend more support and help to our minorities as well. For this, we will be joined online by Sardar Ramesh Singh Arora, who's MPA PMLN from Punjab. He's our guest on the show. Sardar Sahab, are you with us? We still haven't been able to establish a connection with him yet, but Faisal, I'll let you take the floor now, since you were eager to do that earlier as well. This is, of course, an important day for the minorities in the country. What message do you want to give to them?
Yeah, the message, Sana, as always, is that no doubt they have been, playing their ample role in every, aspect of the society and in the nation building since the day one. And we have very huge names like Rana Bhagwan Das, who once was obviously Chief Justice of Pakistan, and Pakistan minorities has always played a key role. And in this context, I wanted to highlight, even in our armed forces, minorities are playing a brilliant role, and in a war on terror as well. Two of one of the officer and one was a Jawan from the Hindu community. They laid their lives for the country in war on terror, so they have contribution in every field.
There are other sacrifices also. The Sikh community officers have actually laid their life,
exactly,
and so have Christians, right?
So
there are so many heroes.
So many heroes since the day one. But I was just talking about the war on terror. Even today, so many officers and Jawans in Air Force, in Pak Army, in Naval Forces, they are serving Pakistan. And if we talk about the other fields like doctors, there are still serving as advocates in every field, and even in the civil services as well.
Right, absolutely.
Examples are so many.
There are numerous.
This shows that Pakistan is a country that believes in justice, that believes in unity, and that believes in minorities playing a key role.
Let me welcome now Mr. Sardar Ramesh Singh Arora, who's MPA PMLN Punjab. Sardar Sahab, can you hear me?
Thank you.
Right. So, of course, today is the National Day of Minorities in Pakistan. So, very happy National Day of Minorities to you. And, of course, this is something that Pakistan has declared since 2009. And we, of course, want to renew our commitment to protecting and supporting the minorities in Pakistan every year. But I want to hear from you regarding what really do you think is going on in terms of the way the minorities are treated or respected in the country. I want to understand if Pakistan is treating you right.
Yeah, thank you so very much. First of all, many congratulations and happy Minority Day everywhere, to everyone here in Pakistan, and all of those Pakistanis who are outside the Pakistan. So many happy Minority Day, all of them. So look, if when you're talking about how the minority is treated here in Pakistan and how the people of Pakistan treat them. So to be very honest, frankly, here, I'm talking to on behalf of the minority, we consider ourselves that the state of the Pakistan, the constitution of Pakistan guarantees our rights. And particularly if you talk about the Sikh minority here in Pakistan, we consider ourselves that we are the one who consider ourselves that we are a privileged minority because I believe the Sikh community, the Sikh families, either they are living in KP, they are living in Punjab, they are living in Balochistan, they are living in Sindh. Everyone is protected, and the local law enforcement agencies, the local community, and the state guarantees their rights. So today we celebrated this day not only in the Government House, Punjab, rather we celebrated this day in the National Assembly. So today the doors were opened, and the minority leaders, not only the political leadership, the religious leadership, or ordinary like Pakistani from Christian faith, from Sikhism, from Hinduism, from Parsi, Bhai, and other minority groups that were there. And they spoke their views about the Pakistan, how they are treated in Pakistan. And everyone, there was a resolve that Pakistan is a country where we consider ourselves that we are safe and protected. And if you talk about the challenges and issues, you cannot say that issues and challenges are not everywhere. If we talk about the West, issues and challenges are everywhere, and how we are going to cope up those issues and challenges, that is another issue. So being a nation, and we all are free, and we all are a patriotic Pakistanis. So how we are going to address those challenges, that is being a local being a Pakistani, we will address those challenges.
Can you hear me? Okay, so I really specifically want to also talk about the issue. Of course, you're mentioning issues and challenges that still exist, and understand that they do, and of course we need to be able to deal with them. But there is, of course, growing intolerance throughout the country as well, and unfortunately we have seen intolerant incidents within Pakistan as well. So we want to, of course, look at this particular challenge perhaps more closely and try to see how we're going to be dealing with that, because this means that this is something that is going on ground, in cities, in the street. And how do we actually are able to focus on this challenge, or what sort of measure or development do you think is required from the government side or the state side in order to tackle this?
You pointed out a very valid point. Nowadays, and the same we discussed while we are raising our points there in the Punjab, in the National Assembly. And one major thing which came into discussion, that was the polarization, because nowadays society is polarized. So when we talk about the polarization, it's not only minority group, the society as a whole, the society is polarized. So we all are Pakistanis. So we need to understand the issues, the challenges, and we need to work on that, how you're going to change the attitude of the people. So if there is a phenomena, there's some group pressure groups who are trying to mold people for their own motives, for their own purposes, certainly the society would be polarized, and the result would be there would be intolerance. And you can observe the intolerance, particularly while we're talking about the minority groups, because minority are already they are vulnerable, because in numbers they're very easy and soft target. So that's why, being a Pakistani, we need to work on that, how we can reduce this polarization, because if there is a polarization in the country, certainly there would be intolerance, and intolerance would come towards civil disobedience, intolerance would cause assassination of people, intolerance would cause minority being targeted. So you
Right,
have pointed
absolutely.
out it very well.
Unfortunately, Sardar Ramesh Saab, we're unfortunately out of time, but thank you very much for taking the time out and being a part of the debate. And we really hope that we continue to do more for you and that we are able to overcome all of these challenges. Farrukh, your quick word on the white in our flag.
Right. So, first of all, it is important to remember why we celebrate this day on this day, right? On August 11. Because Qaeda Muhammad Ali Jinnah, in his first speech on 11th August 1947 on the floor of the House in the Assembly, actually declared that the time will come when all Muslims, Hindus and other minorities will cease to be minorities in the eyes of law, and they will only be citizens. In religious sense, they will keep their identity, but in political sense, they won't, right? And that is very important thing to remember. I wish that instead of calling it a day of minority, we would have called it a National Day for non-Muslim Pakistanis. That would have been better mainstreaming because they all are equal. And I think that instead of treating anybody or calling them minorities, we can say that we all are equal, at least in the eyes of law. And we shouldn't be focusing on this treatment issue, right? They have contributed immensely in this country. I have so many friends. I know so many people and teachers and others who have been heroes, absolute heroes, who are from other religious communities than Muslims, and they have contributed immensely to Pakistan. It is very important. You see, there are two neighbors that you have to look at, and you have to learn lesson. One is Afghanistan, the other one is India. And there is only one reason I never endorse Narendra Modi's policies, or for that matter Taliban's, because in the end it is a world of karma. Someday our own home can actually be compromised in the same fashion. It is important right now to stand up for the people who were underrepresented and give them as much right as possible. Today, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari actually spoke to a convention of minorities in the National Assembly, and there he particularly spoke about creating a parliamentary committee to ensure that non-Muslim Pakistanis get all the rights that are promised to them by the law.
Absolutely, and of course that is what needs to be done. More space needs to be given, real action needs to be taken, and not just words, and of course not just verbal support. We need to do much more than that, and we hope we could do it. Of course, we're celebrating the Diamond Jubilee of Pakistan independence very soon, so it's about time that we make the right changes that Pakistan needs. That's all that we have from the debate. See you tomorrow.